I want to begin today with something that reaches deeper than most conversations around this subject, because beneath all the confusion, there is one painful question many people silently carry. Am I the person they truly love, or am I simply the person they keep around as an option? This question rarely appears dramatically. It usually arrives quietly, during moments of silence, when you are alone with your thoughts and trying to understand the difference between what you feel and what their actions seem to show. You begin analyzing patterns, remembering moments, and searching for clues in the way they respond to you. You start wondering where you truly stand in their emotional world, and this question deserves more than a temporary reassurance meant to calm your fears. It deserves an honest answer based on psychology, attachment patterns, and the specific ways avoidant individuals behave when their feelings are either meaningful or simply comfortable. Before we look at the differences between being deeply loved by an avoidant and being someone they consider an option, there is something important we need to understand about avoidant attachment. Without this foundation, many of the signs can become confusing because the outside behavior often looks very similar. An avoidant person does not usually express love in the same way that someone with a secure attachment style might. Consistent availability, constant emotional openness, and uninterrupted closeness are not always the natural language of avoidant affection, even when their feelings are strong. This means that both the person they truly love and the person they only partially invest in may experience moments of warmth, connection, attention, and even emotional intensity. Both people may feel seen, both may feel valued, both may experience genuine affection. This overlap is exactly what creates so much uncertainty. The difference is not simply whether warmth exists. The real difference is found in the depth of that warmth, the emotional risk involved, and the personal sacrifices the avoidant is willing to make within each connection. When I talk about sacrifice or emotional cost, I am referring to something very specific. Avoidant individuals often operate from a place of emotional protection. Their instinct is to preserve their independence, control their vulnerability, and avoid situations that require them to expose parts of themselves they have learned to keep guarded. In connections that remain emotionally safer and less threatening, they can participate without having to challenge those protective patterns. The connection can feel real, but it does not demand much internal change from them. They can care, enjoy the person's company, and offer affection while still remaining inside the emotional boundaries they have created. But when they encounter someone they truly love, something different begins to happen. That relationship starts requiring them to move beyond the identity they have built around being self-sufficient and unaffected. They begin feeling things that are harder to control. They begin making efforts that do not come naturally. They begin stepping outside emotional habits that once protected them. Those moments of stretching beyond their usual limits are often where the deepest signs of avoidant love appear. One of the biggest differences between how an avoidant treats someone they deeply love compared to someone who is simply an option is the level of emotional comfort they experience. With an option, the avoidant may still genuinely enjoy the relationship. They may feel attracted, connected, interested, and happy around that person. It does not mean the connection is fake or meaningless. They may be caring, attentive, and even affectionate. However, the relationship usually remains within a level of closeness that does not activate their deepest fears around vulnerability and emotional dependence. The connection feels manageable because it does not force them to confront the parts of themselves they normally avoid. Because of this, the person who is only an option may actually experience a calmer version of the avoidant. They may see someone who appears more predictable, more available, and less emotionally conflicted. The avoidant may not suddenly disappear when things become closer, because the relationship never reaches the point where their protective system feels challenged. The person an avoidant truly loves often experiences something very different. Instead of receiving a perfectly stable and effortless connection, they may experience emotional waves that feel confusing and painful. They experience moments where the avoidant is deeply present, affectionate, and connected, followed by periods where that same person becomes distant, quiet, or emotionally unavailable. On the surface, this can look like a loss of interest, but sometimes it happens because the connection has reached a level of importance that feels overwhelming to the avoidant's nervous system. The withdrawal does not always happen because the feelings disappeared. Sometimes it happens because the feelings became too powerful for the person's current emotional capacity to handle. They pull away not because the connection means nothing, but because it means more than they know how to comfortably process. This is one of the most painful contradictions of avoidant attachment. The person who receives the strongest emotional reaction may also receive the most confusing behavior. The stronger the bond becomes, the more the avoidant may struggle with their own internal response. The push and pull, the closeness followed by distance, the desire followed by retreat, can sometimes reveal that the connection has reached a level where their emotional defenses are being challenged. In these situations, the instability is not automatically proof of deeper love, because unhealthy patterns can exist for many reasons, but the intensity of their internal conflict often shows that something meaningful has been activated. The avoidant is not simply reacting to the person, they are reacting to what that person brings up inside them. The relationship becomes a mirror that reflects feelings they may have spent years avoiding. Another major difference appears in the way avoidants pay attention. Attention alone does not always reveal emotional depth, because avoidant individuals can be attentive with many people. They can remember details, enjoy conversations, and show genuine interest in someone they like. However, the quality of that attention changes when deeper feelings are involved. With someone who is simply an option, their attention often remains focused on the visible parts of the person. They notice personality, appearance, interests, humor, and the qualities that are easy to understand from the outside. They appreciate the version of that person that is presented to the world. But when an avoidant truly loves someone, their attention often moves beyond the surface. They begin noticing the hidden layers. They become curious about the person's fears, emotional patterns, dreams, insecurities, and the experiences that shaped who they are. They start recognizing small things that others may overlook. They notice changes in mood before the person explains them. They remember subtle details that were mentioned casually weeks or months earlier. They become aware of contradictions between someone's words and their emotions, because avoidant individuals themselves often understand the space between what someone says and what they actually feel. This deeper awareness is not always intentional. Sometimes they are surprised by how much they notice. They may not want to become this emotionally connected, but their attention naturally moves toward understanding the person on a much deeper level. This kind of emotional awareness is one of the ways genuine attachment begins to separate itself from simple comfort or convenience. A responsiveness to your inner world, even the parts you never directly explain, reveals a level of emotional investment that the avoidant may not have expected from themselves. It shows a type of connection that their own protective patterns cannot fully account for. With someone who is simply an option, the avoidant notices you. They are aware of you, they enjoy you, and they engage with you. But with the person they truly love, something much deeper happens. They find themselves constantly aware of you, even when they are actively trying to create distance. They may attempt to disconnect, distract themselves, or convince themselves they do not care as much as they do, but their attention keeps returning. The person they truly love remains emotionally present in their mind in a way that is difficult for them to control or explain. The third major difference appears in the way an avoidant responds to conflict. This is an area where many people misunderstand avoidant behavior because they often interpret emotional distance as a sign that the person does not care. But conflict can reveal something much more complicated. When dealing with someone who is only an option, the avoidant often remains relatively controlled. They use their familiar strategies, staying logical, creating emotional distance, lowering the intensity of the conversation, and approaching the disagreement from a place of observation rather than emotional involvement. It can feel like they are standing behind a glass wall, calm and unaffected, while the other person is experiencing all the emotional weight of the situation. But this does not always mean they feel nothing. It often means they are operating in a space where they still feel emotionally safe and in control. When the conflict involves someone they deeply love, that emotional control can become much harder to maintain. The response becomes less polished, less predictable, and more revealing. The avoidant's usual ability to stay composed under pressure may begin to crack in subtle ways. This does not always mean dramatic, emotional reactions or obvious displays of vulnerability, because many avoidant individuals still struggle to openly express intense feelings. Instead, it appears through small moments where their usual emotional management system stops working perfectly. They may react more strongly than they intended. They may say things they would normally filter. They may show frustration, fear, hurt, or attachment in ways that expose how deeply affected they actually are. These moments are not always pleasant, and they are not always the type of behavior someone would want to experience in a relationship, but they often reveal that something has reached beyond simple emotional control. The person who is only an option usually does not challenge the avoidance emotional defenses enough to create this kind of reaction. The connection stays within the limits of what they know how to manage, but the person they truly love can reach places inside them that others cannot access. That does not mean every intense reaction automatically represents love, because unhealthy patterns can exist too. However, when someone's usual emotional distance starts breaking down specifically within one relationship, it can reveal that the connection carries a level of importance they are struggling to contain. The very fact that the person has the ability to disrupt their emotional strategy shows that the bond has reached somewhere deeper than ordinary comfort. The fourth difference is something that becomes clearer through time, and I believe it is one of the strongest signs separating deep love from simple attachment or convenience. It is what I call the return to authenticity. When an avoidant is with someone who remains within the category of an option, they can often maintain a consistent version of themselves for a long period. They present the version they have carefully developed over the years: independent, capable, composed, emotionally controlled, and seemingly unaffected by the need for anyone else. This version is not completely fake. It is still a part of who they are. But it is a carefully managed version of themselves, a version that has been shaped to avoid exposing the more vulnerable parts underneath. The person who is only an option usually receives this controlled version because the relationship does not create enough emotional pressure for the deeper layers to emerge. They see the person the avoidant has learned to present to the world. But with someone they truly love, that carefully managed identity begins to slip in small but meaningful ways. Not completely, and not all at once, but enough that patterns begin to appear over time. The person underneath the defenses begins showing up. The wounded parts, the softer parts, the parts that reveal their struggles with vulnerability and their desire for connection despite their fear of it. The avoidant begins showing that their independence is not always simply a personality trait, but sometimes a protection they created to survive emotional discomfort. This return to the authentic self can appear in many different forms. Sometimes it happens through words. The avoidant may unexpectedly share something personal, express a feeling, or reveal a fear they normally keep hidden. It may happen during a moment of closeness when their defenses are lowered before they even realize it. Other times, it appears through actions that contradict the image they have created for themselves. They may show a need for reassurance. They may reveal tenderness. They may demonstrate sadness, longing, or emotional dependence in moments when they usually try to appear completely self-contained. These moments often surprise them because they do not match the identity they have spent years protecting. There is also a difference in the way they feel when they are emotionally present. With the option, the avoidant may remain comfortable inside the role they know how to play. But with the person they truly love, there can be brief moments where the walls come down and something different becomes visible. They seem more alive, more genuine, and more connected to who they actually are beneath the defenses. Those moments are often what the option never experiences because the deeper emotional channel has not been activated. That channel usually opens when the connection becomes significant enough that pretending becomes harder than being vulnerable. When the avoidant's real self appears in your presence, it is not simply a mistake or a temporary loss of control. It can be a powerful indication that something inside them feels safe enough, important enough, or emotionally intense enough to bypass their usual defenses. It is almost like a confession their words may never be able to express directly. Their psychology reveals something that their fear may prevent them from openly admitting. The fifth difference comes down to what the avoidant is willing to sacrifice, and this may be the clearest distinction of all, because genuine sacrifice requires something real from a person. It cannot be easily performed, copied, or created just to maintain an image. True emotional sacrifice requires effort, discomfort, and a willingness to move beyond personal convenience. It requires the person to give something up, because the relationship matters more than staying completely protected. With someone who is only an option, the avoidant usually does not reach this point. They may offer attention, affection, and companionship, but they rarely challenge their own emotional comfort for the sake of the connection. The relationship remains within the boundaries of what feels manageable, but when someone truly matters, those boundaries begin to change. The avoidant starts doing things that cost them emotionally, because losing the connection feels more significant than staying completely protected. This is not a sign of someone being a bad person or failing morally. It is simply the natural result of a connection that has not reached the level where true sacrifice becomes possible. An avoidant person can still be kind, caring, generous, and emotionally present with someone who is only an option. They can give time, attention, affection, and genuine moments of connection. They are not necessarily pretending or manipulating. The care can be real. But even with that care, they usually do not sacrifice the parts of themselves that their identity depends on protecting. They do not challenge the story that they must always be completely independent. They do not deeply question their emotional habits. They do not make changes that require them to confront the parts of themselves they have spent years defending. The relationship remains within the boundaries of what feels safe and familiar. But with the person they truly love, something begins to shift. The avoidant starts making sacrifices that they may not even fully recognize at first. These sacrifices are usually quiet. They are not dramatic announcements or obvious declarations. Instead, they appear through repeated patterns over time. They sacrifice the comfort of always being emotionally controlled because they allow themselves to experience feelings that feel overwhelming. They sacrifice the belief that they need no one because they begin acknowledging, even indirectly, that someone's presence matters deeply to them. Your attention, your understanding, your specific way of connecting with them begins to hold value they cannot easily replace. They sacrifice the simplicity of a life built around emotional distance because staying connected with you requires them to become more emotionally available than their old identity allows. These sacrifices are often uncomfortable for the avoidant because they challenge the very defenses that once helped them feel safe. Their ego does not celebrate these changes. Their protective system often fights against them. But despite that resistance, something begins changing little by little. You see it in the moments where they step outside their normal patterns. You see it in the times they choose connection, even when distance would feel easier. You see it in the small actions that reveal they are slowly moving toward emotional openness. These moments may not be perfect. They may come with hesitation and setbacks. But when they consistently appear over time, they create a pattern of evidence that points towards something deeper than simple comfort. The option does not usually create this kind of internal conflict. Only a connection powerful enough to challenge their emotional identity can create that level of movement. Now, it is important to understand the experience of the person who is only an option, because this is where many people become confused. The reason it can be so difficult to tell the difference is because the option does not receive a cold or uncaring version of the avoidant. In many cases, they receive someone who appears incredibly attentive, warm, and emotionally available within certain limits. The avoidant may make them feel appreciated. They may make them feel attractive, valued, and important. They may create moments where the person genuinely feels chosen. This happens because the avoidant is not fighting against their own emotional defenses in that relationship. Their nervous system does not feel overwhelmed. Their fears around vulnerability are not being strongly activated. They are simply existing within a level of connection that feels manageable. From this comfortable emotional position, the avoidant's positive qualities can appear very naturally. Their intelligence, their ability to notice details, their kindness, their humor, and their ability to make someone feel understood can all come forward without much internal resistance. The option often experiences the avoidant when they are functioning at their most balanced and consistent. They experience the version of the avoidant who is relaxed because nothing inside them feels threatened, compared to the person they deeply love, who may experience withdrawal, emotional confusion, or moments of distance. The option can appear to have received the better version of the relationship. It may seem like they received more stability and less pain, but that stability exists because the relationship has not reached the emotional depth that creates internal conflict. What the option receives is the avoidant within their comfort zone. They receive a connection that feels good because it does not require major emotional growth. They receive affection that is easier to give because it does not demand much vulnerability. They receive consistency because the avoidant is not being pushed against the emotional boundaries they have created. The comfort zone can feel pleasant, but it is not necessarily where the deepest parts of the avoidant exist. It is where they feel safest. It is where they can maintain control. But safety and depth are not always the same thing. The person an avoidant truly loves often experiences something much more complicated. They experience the avoidant while they are being challenged by their own emotions. They experience the struggle between wanting closeness and fearing what closeness requires. They experience the moments where the avoidant's feelings become too powerful to completely hide behind emotional distance. This can be painful because love does not always appear in the easiest form. Sometimes it appears through contradictions, through hesitation, through attempts to pull away while still remaining emotionally attached. The person they love often sees the evidence of a connection that has exceeded the avoidant's ability to comfortably manage it. This brings us to the question many people are secretly asking: which one am I? Am I the person they truly love, or am I simply someone who feels convenient and safe? I want to answer that honestly, which means acknowledging something difficult first. The answer is not always obvious from the inside of the relationship. I have seen people who are highly aware, thoughtful, and emotionally intelligent struggle deeply with this question because the outside behaviors can look very similar. Both relationships can include affection, both can include attention, both can include moments of closeness. The difference often exists beneath the surface, in the emotional cost, the vulnerability, and the internal struggle that the connection creates for the avoidant. Instead of searching for one obvious sign, it is more useful to ask yourself deeper questions. Does this person show signs of stepping outside their normal emotional patterns, specifically with you? Not just moments of kindness or affection, because both connections can have those. Look for the things that require effort from them. Look for moments where they reveal parts of themselves they usually protect. Look for times when their carefully controlled image becomes less perfect because something real has surfaced. Have they shown signs of emotional honesty, even briefly? Have they allowed themselves to need something from you? Have they made small sacrifices that they did not have to make? Ask yourself whether their attention reaches beyond the surface. Do they simply enjoy your presence, or do they seem deeply aware of your inner world? Do they remember the small things you say? Do they notice emotions you have not spoken about? Do they understand parts of you that you rarely show others? And perhaps one of the most important questions is this: when distance happens, is it a general pattern of emotional avoidance, or does it appear specifically when the relationship reaches moments of deeper connection? These questions are not designed to create perfect certainty because relationships, emotions, and human behavior are far too complex for that. But they can help you move away from fantasy and toward reality. The truth may not always be the answer you hoped for, but honest understanding gives you the ability to make choices based on what is actually happening, rather than the version of the story you desperately want to believe. I want to end with something that goes beyond the question of whether you are the person they truly love or simply someone they keep as an option. Because after spending so much time understanding attachment, emotional defenses, and relationship patterns, I have learned that this question, although incredibly meaningful, is not the deepest question you can ask yourself. The more important question is not where you stand inside an avoidant person's emotional world. The question that matters most is whether the relationship itself is honoring you, whether it is giving you the kind of love, respect, and emotional presence that you deserve. Whether the connection, despite its challenges and imperfections, is moving towards something healthier, safer, and more mutual. Because being the person who awakened their deepest emotions does not automatically mean the relationship is fulfilling your needs. Being the person who reached parts of them that others never reached, the person who challenged their defenses, the person they continue to carry emotionally, does not by itself create a healthy partnership. Deep feelings alone do not guarantee consistent effort. They do not guarantee reliability. They do not guarantee that someone will show up for you in the ordinary moments that actually build a lasting relationship. Love is not only found in intense emotions or private struggles. It is also found in everyday actions, in emotional availability, in accountability, in the willingness to choose someone repeatedly through both easy and difficult moments. A person can feel something incredibly deep for you and still not have developed the ability to express that love in a way that allows you to feel secure and valued. An avoidant person can genuinely love you in the ways we have discussed and still be unable at this point in their emotional growth to provide the kind of connection you need. Both things can exist at the same time. Their love can be real, and your pain can also be real. Their feelings can be genuine, and your needs can still remain unmet. Understanding their internal struggles does not mean you have to ignore your own emotional reality. It does not mean you should accept endless uncertainty simply because you know there is love underneath the distance. It does not create an obligation for you to stay in a situation that continuously drains you. Knowing someone loves you can help you understand the relationship, but it should never become a reason to abandon yourself. What this understanding gives you is clarity. It allows you to separate what was genuine from what was blocked by fear. It helps you recognize the difference between a lack of feeling and a lack of emotional capacity.